Okay, so maybe let's start. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to be here with you today for this session about batteries and more specifically about the economic, societal, and environmental impact of batteries. Maybe first of all, let's start with some technicalities. Can we have the slide desk? Yes, thank you. So please keep your microphone and camera turned off. You can ask questions in the chat, and at the end of this webinar, we will have 40 minutes to answer your questions and to have a panel discussion. So please ask your question and use the chat for that. You can also vote for questions if you think that a question is really should be answered. So you can vote for deciding which question is more important. And please note that this event is being recorded. So I am Simon Perrault. I work for CEA Lytton, which is a research organization based in France, and I will moderate this session today. And it's my pleasure to introduce the four speakers participating to this session. Ilka von Dalvik from EIT InnoEnergy, Edel Sheridan from SINTEF, Michael Lippert from BEPA and SAFT, and Christina Edström from Battery 2030 Plus and Uppsala University. The agenda is the following. We will first have, I will give a very brief introductory speech just to set the scene. Then we will have a presentation by our four speakers, so it will last approximately 40 minutes. And after that, we will have a panel discussion and to answer your questions and also to discuss with the speakers about the different topics that we should address during this webinar. And again, it will last approximately 40 minutes. And at the end of the webinar, we will conclude. And I think we will stop around 3 p.m. today. So if we can move to the next slide, please. I just want to show you two slides. It will be very brief to set the scene and to give some elements of context. So today we are here to speak about batteries and about the economic impact, the societal impact, and the environmental impact of the battery technologies. So this slide is just to give some order of magnitudes about what we are talking about. So you can see this is a graph I took from a recent report from Fraunhofer and the EIT, where you can see the expected battery cell production capacity in Europe. So these are the bars, and you can also see on the lines the expected demand in Europe. So you have the scale on the left-hand side of the graph, and the scale is in gigawatt hour per year. So what you can see is that by 2030, with the current gigafactory projects already planned in Europe, we should reach a production capacity in Europe around 800 gigawatt hour per year. So it's quite significant. And if we try to translate these figures in terms of economic impact, environmental impact, and societal impact, this is what you have on the top of the slide. So in terms of environment first, this production capacity, if you take an average 50 kilowatt hour per electric vehicle, it corresponds to around 16 million electric vehicles that could be produced per year. And this is a quite significant number because it roughly corresponds to the current market in the European Union. So it means that with this 800 gigawatt-hour per year capacity, we should be able to cover the current market for cars in the European Union, and to have all these cars being electric vehicles. Then, in terms of economic impact, if we take an average price for the battery pack around 70 euro per kilowatt-hour, this is maybe what we will reach by 2030. Then it gives you a market size at the battery pack level. I'm not speaking about what will happen at the electric vehicle level, but if we just stay at the battery pack level, it gives an average market size of more than 50 billion euros per year. So we are talking about something quite significant. And then in terms of societal impacts, there are many impacts that we can discuss, but a very important impact is, of course, job creation. And in this interesting report from Fraunhofer, we can see that there is around 250 jobs created by gigawatt hour. So if you make this simple calculation, it gives you 200,000 jobs created in Europe at that time. So again, this is not, this is just to give some order of magnitude and setting the scene. Then the second slide that I want to show you is this one about the battery research and innovation landscape in Europe, because you will see in the presentations that will follow that the battery landscape, the research and innovation landscape on batteries in Europe is quite rich. So I think it's worth explaining a little bit how it works. So the general framework is the European Battery Alliance, which is managed by EUSEW. So this is what you have on the left-hand side of the slide. This Battery Alliance was created and launched by the European Commission in 2017. And it promotes a number of initiatives. Some initiatives aiming at creating business and developing business in Europe. So this is, for example, the Business Investment Platform, the BIP, which is managed by EUSEW today. You have also other initiatives aiming at developing education and training. So this is, for example, the European Battery Academy, also managed by EUSEW. And then you have also the different initiatives looking at research and innovation. So in this case, you have three main bodies or organizations. The first one is Battery 2030 Plus, which is a network of research organizations and industry developing a long-term research roadmap, and also coordinating a portfolio of European projects which are implementing this long-term roadmap. Then you have also Batteries Europe, which is in charge of defining a holistic research and innovation strategy for Europe, and developing short to medium-term roadmaps, so quite complementary to what Battery 2030 Plus is doing. And finally, you have on this slide the BAT4EU, which is the new European partnership in Horizon Europe that will propose a work program, research and innovation program in Horizon Europe to develop battery technologies. And BAT4EU will take inputs from Battery 2030 Plus and Batteries Europe. And what is also interesting to notice on this slide is that within Horizon Europe, there is not only BAT4EU, the BAT4EU partnership, you have also other European partnerships dealing with batteries, especially on the downstream side of the value chain. So for example, the 2.0 partnership, looking at road transport. You have also partnerships on aviation, on motorborne transport, and so on. So you have a number of instruments and partnerships in Horizon Europe that will deal with batteries together with BAT4EU. And you have also, of course, other initiatives at the member state level or at the European level, which are not in Horizon Europe. So a good example are probably the IPCEI, the important project of common European interest, which are very important to go from the lab to the market. Okay, so this was just to set the scene, and now we will move to the presentation. So we will start with Ilka van Dalvik from EIT Energy. Ilka will present us European Battery Alliance. So let me first introduce Ilka. Ilka is a senior policy and technology expert at EIT Energy. She has more than 10 years of experience in the energy transition in different contexts, commercial, public, private, and policy environments. She's today the policy manager for smart grid and storage, working on the industrial work stream of the European Battery Alliance. And she has been instrumental in building up and managing the stakeholder network of this Battery Alliance. And as well developing a set of recommendations and actions that have been identified by the Battery Alliance as necessary to make the European Union a key player in the global battery market. So Ilka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for this nice introduction, and also for having the possibility to present the work of the EBA 250 in this important webinar. I think we can go directly and dive into the presentation. With this selection of news articles that are from this year only, I think we can all agree on that the age of the internal combustion engine is soon coming to an end, and that the European automotive industry really embraced electrification as the way forward. Some of those news, I think, are very encouraging, with increased time plans to go fully electric. And there are also increasing news that various companies even stop development of internal combustion engines and also plug-in hybrids. So I think the importance of batteries is all clear for us, and the importance to the European economy as well. Yeah, please switch the slide. But if we looking back to 2017, I think the starting point was completely different. We had, especially in the upstream segment and cell development, no activities whatsoever in Europe. There was one LG Chem was starting to produce cells in Poland, but otherwise there was very little in this sector to be done. But we did a number of market surveys and studies, and realized that by 2020 there would be an enormous increase in car sales in the EV sector, the so-called tipping point that we saw was of a great importance to actually develop those values for the European industry, and also to secure jobs within the European Union, as we are very dependent on the automotive industry especially. So I think with this forecast, we started to our work, and this was, as Pascal mentioned, the birth of the European Battery Alliance, or EBA 250. We can go on. Today, we are a network that covers actors all along the battery value chain. So we're going from raw materials to the cell production over to the applications, and then feeding it back via recycling. We're covering certain research and associations, as well as European Commission service, and an increasing number of financial institutions in our network. I think that one of the success factors has been that we always had this common target in mind to really develop a European industry. So this is only for organizations that really have a footprint in Europe already, or are committed to engage and increase the European industry part of that. You can go on. With this picture, it is just to send this reminder that many of you that are listening today, I think, actually helped out as those key stakeholders in developing some of the actions that are currently being realized from the early stages on. What we started with in the early beginnings was actually to develop an action plan that we developed together with the industry, with research organizations, with public stakeholders, delivered it to the European Commission, that then was realized and integrated in the European battery strategy. And if you can go one more further. I just wanted to remind you that we actually have achieved a great deal since we started. In blue, you see the 5 different main objectives on the strategic action plan on batteries, and on the green ones are just examples of what has been realized since then. We have now a European Raw Material Alliance launched that is looking at securing raw materials in the upstream sectors. We have 2 IPCIs launched on batteries, which is quite, I think, a milestone. We had, when you're looking at research and innovation, that I'm very much looking forward to discuss further. We have not only Batteries Europe and the battery partnerships and Battery 2030 Plus launched, but I think what's most important that we have also a thriving R&I ecosystem as a result of bringing all those people together. We have also actions along strengthening the skill, the workforce. And from the very important things I would say on the policy side is the proposal of the new battery regulation. But that, of course, there are also other policy frameworks like the Fit for 55 directives that all directly push for an increased electrification, and the role of batteries is really strengthens. You can go one more forward. The tipping point that I mentioned before, what has happened with that? I think we can realize that many of the forecasts actually are as often maybe not quite correct, but what we see in the battery world, we see that that reality is actually ahead of most of the forecasts. So we see a market that is developing tremendously fast, and especially in Europe. In 2020, we overtook actually China as the greatest market for electric vehicles. I think maybe this year this will change back, but at least we will be at pair with China in the EV market. You can go one more forward. And how is this perceived? I think Norway has always been a leading country with regard to the adoption of EVs. They had a lot of governmental incentives as well to promote EVs. But also there, I think the market once again is leading the way. And if you can see the sales number, we had over 90% of market share of battery and plug-in hybrids already. If you're looking at the sales of diesel and other fuels, it's almost down to 0. So even there we are ahead of the plan, and they are looking at a phase out, I think, in 2025, if I'm not completely mistaken. But I think we will reach this point even before that. And next slide, please. And the same is also catching up in other major market. And if you, what I think is very astonishing is that we really shorten the time to go from 10 to 50% of battery electric vehicles. It took Norway 5 years. In Sweden, the same transition only took 2 years. So we are very excited to see what will happen in other major markets like Germany and France that are still lagging a little bit behind. The next one, please. And of course, the role of policies and a supportive framework is tremendous, and actually pushing forward into the same direction. I think there are many different ways of going forward. There are incentives, taxes. A great deal are the CO2 emission thresholds and targets that are being forwarded right now by the Commission as well. And there, I think, just reflecting back on the first picture, I think it is really reflected in a lot of industrial strategies right now. One thing here, summarizing the market, I think we can be surprised once again on the speed of this transition, and I think we are all convinced that EVs will clearly dominate the European car sales in the coming decade. There will be some, I think the market is adapting. There will be more and more people convinced that buying an EV is a good idea. I think there are many obstacles that we have overcome when it comes to driving range, when it comes to prices and costs of owning an EV or leasing an EV, where we see prices coming down. I think one of the remaining things that we really need to work on is charging infrastructure. And it's not only about the access of charging infrastructure throughout Europe, but it's also to enable unified billing systems to really make it customer friendly. But those things are also addressed in the Fit for 55 directive. So I think we will see positive developments over there as well. The next one. I think we go very fast. This is just a reflection on that the demand is building up in Europe. We have currently about 47 projects that we are tracking, and they're only looking at cell production in Germany, in Europe, my apologies. And all of those projects, if they're materialized, they will of course need a lot of materials to be fueled. And next one, please. And we made an investigation at the beginning of this year and looking at what actually can we supply from European resources to the European battery industry. And as you can see, when it comes to cell production capacity and application, it looks fairly good, but there's still a lot more to be done when it comes to the supply side. On the materials, both the raw materials, but also the processed materials. And I think here, and as well as recycling. And I think here is especially an opportunity also for Europe to do a lot on material research. And I hope to learn a little bit more about that. And our prognosis come even up a little bit. We are looking actually at a terawatt hour demand in 2030. Yeah, you can go to the summary slides. I think I just leave it here with you. I think the development that we have seen is really going faster than we have anticipated, which poses a great challenge, but also a good opportunity, especially for the R&I community to gain market shares and really show that Europe is on the forefront. We need really the supportive regulatory framework, and we have really to speed up when it comes to access of sustainable materials for the battery industry to sustain this industrial growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilka, for this interesting presentation, your interesting presentation. We will move to the next speaker, who is Edel Sheridan from Syntef. Edel is a senior business developer at Syntef, which is a large research and technology organization based in Norway. She is also the technical lead of the Batteries Europe ETIP and a member of the executive board of BEPA, the Battery European Partnership Association. Edel has worked extensively, like Ilka, to gather the battery research community and has contributed to launch a number of initiatives, including Battery 2030 Plus, the Batteries Europe ETIP, and the European Energy Research Alliance for Energy Storage, the ERA Energy Storage group. And earlier in her career, she has worked as a research scientist with a focus on material development for batteries. Edel holds a PhD in electrochemistry from Maynooth University in Ireland. Edel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simon, for a very kind introduction. Also, Ilka, thank you for bringing us the good news to really demonstrate that this is happening, that this industry is developing very quickly. But there are some things we really have to solve, and we can do a lot of this through the research and innovation. I have the privilege of being the technical lead in Batteries Europe, and I do feel I'm often standing on the shoulder of giants. We have around about 560 expert members who give input into Batteries Europe and help us really understand and develop an overview of what needs to be done. So the next slide, please. So just to give a quick look, what is Batteries Europe? We're basically a network where we're taking together all the people coming from the various stakeholders in the battery industry and battery ecosystem. Our purpose really is to boost the growth of the European battery industry through research and innovation activities. When I say through the research and innovation activities, we don't specifically as the network do the research and innovation, but our members and those who are giving input do. We have a very holistic approach. We look at the entire battery ecosystem, so the entire battery value chain from end to end, which we feel is very important to cover all these areas. And we also have a very open access to different stakeholders. We want to hear from the industry, from the research community, and from the policymakers, and likewise to share the information that we develop. So Batteries Europe was launched in 2019, and it has been very strongly supported by the European Commission, which we are very, very grateful for. So the next slide, please. So here, what I really want to point out is the battery value chain, it's complex. There's a lot of different components and elements going on here. And this presents a lot of challenges, but it also presents a lot of opportunities because there's so many points along the value chain, along the production lines, along the integration, where we can make improvements. Improvements which will mean better sustainability in our world and will also mean that we can reduce our cost and be really competitive on the global stage. So we have everything included, and we have our separate working groups structured along the value chain in order to represent all these different areas. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this is just, and click again, please. So this is just to demonstrate we have this holistic view because this allows us to have the environmental, the economic, and the societal impact that we need. So we look along the entire value chain. We have new and emerging technologies, the raw materials and recycling, advanced materials, cell design and manufacturing, which Ilka pointed out that really earlier we had very little in the line of industry and research in this area, which we're really building up now and accelerating. And then there's the applications, application and integration for mobility and application and integration for stationary. And coming from Norway, I can see many of these applications and integration, particularly in the mobility area, being taken up and utilised. We also have a national and regional coordination group, which is very important. It gives us a channel to understand and to see what is being done in publicly funded projects across Europe. And it also helps us to ensure that we have a good dialogue so that there is a good alignment with what's being done on the European level and the national level so that we don't waste our very valuable resources. So if you go to the, yes. So we have this approach to developing the ecosystem that we want to take all parts of the community in to ensure that everybody's voice is being heard and that we're really getting a holistic picture. And the next slide, please. And if you can just click, yeah. So we also have some task forces because there are several cross-cutting issues in the battery area, which can't be addressed when you look at one single part of the value chain. So we have specifically set up task forces that looked at sustainability, safety, digitalization, and skills and education. I won't be able to dive into all of these today, but I will give a little bit on the skills and education so you understand the importance of really developing and the huge opportunity we will have in this area. Some aspects we want to develop going forward as well, we want to take a closer look at societal aspects. So how do we really get society to take up this technology with EVs? We have seen this developing very, very nicely in Norway, and we're seeing this across Europe. But we see, for example, the maritime sector. When you have people who are working out on fishing boats, do they want to take up the battery technology? You have to really have this good, solid communication with them. We also want to really get a greater view of what's going on globally and track it quite carefully so that we understand the overall picture. So the next slide, please. So this is just a very quick overview of what Batteries Europe has delivered in the last 2.5 years. Initially, we delivered the research and innovation topics document. These are available on the Batteries Europe website hosted by the Commission. We also had our strategic research agenda, which is really the key document, which I'll dive into in a moment and gives an overview of the areas that we have identified where the research needs to be done. Then we have 6 roadmaps covering the battery value chain in the different areas. And in those roadmaps, we really drill down and look at more and provide more detail of what needs to be addressed and kind of where the technology is today and where we need to get to. Each year, we have looked at the performance KPIs. So where are we today with the KPIs and where do we need to go in order to have batteries that are fit for use? In 2020, we also produced 10 peer-reviewed publications with the Journal of Power Sources, which addressed different battery chemistries. So we were able to get a hold of what is the stage of development. And this also motivated a lot of younger researchers to get engaged in Batteries Europe and to connect together. We've also have an overview of the projects that are being run in Europe with public funding. And we have our position papers, which have looked at these cross-cutting issues. In addition, there's one other thing we're working on at the moment, and that's the finalization of the reporting methodologies. In battery technology, there's so much published. It can be really hard to compare. You know, you get a publication that will show a battery that has fantastic results, but it's been cycled maybe 40, 50 times. This is not really what we need. We need to have standards so that we can compare, for example, battery that will be cycled many thousands of times to one that's had 50 cycles. You cannot really compare currently with the way the reporting is done. So this needs to be developed and it needs to be implemented in our European projects. So the next slide, please. So I think I've given you a bit of an overview of what we have delivered. This is just a very small taste of the different key areas we have identified and what we need to do. For example, in the raw materials, we need to look at the sourcing, the sustainability and the traceability. We need to develop really good ways to do this, ways that this is going to be economical. And these will be requirements that come up through the new battery, I was going to say directive, but it is a regulation. We need sustainable extraction and refining, particularly if we're going to utilize the European resources we have available. We need to have good LCA and material flow analysis to understand, are we really benefiting and producing a good sustainable product at the end of the day? In advanced materials, we have lithium-ion materials where we want ideally very high capacity and very high voltage together. Any electrochemist will tell you bringing those two together is very difficult. But this is really what we aim and target for. Solid state batteries, we see these are developing so well. There's a lot of good development, but we're going to have to scale up the development of the materials there, and that presents a very big challenge. Everybody wants materials that will be ultra fast charging. They don't want to wait for their car to charge. But this is something that's going to take a lot of development, not only in the advanced materials, but across to the manufacturing and the integration part. And also another thing that we have seen that is being asked for by many industries is to make the batteries lighter weight. So that will have an impact on all parts, from the advanced materials through to the manufacturing, through to the integration systems, so all the battery management systems and cooling that are surrounding it. So there's a lot to be done there. In manufacturing, this is an area that Europe really is racing now into and really making developments. there has been a really strong focus on developing digital twins, which will really accelerate how we can develop our manufacturing. We also need to have innovation in the machinery we use in our manufacturing processes. The integration of smart functionalities, which I believe Christina will discuss a little bit later, that are being developed in Battery 2030 Plus, we're going to have to integrate those into the actual battery. And the design of the battery and the components. Can we design the cell better in order to, for example, reduce the space and also reduce weight, perhaps? When we look at mobility, there are so many different areas. So there's no kind of one solution fits all when it comes to mobility. But we do know that there are certain things that are going to be important to every application you utilize a battery in. For example, the battery management systems for the optimal utilization. So to use the battery to its best in the particular application, that is quite important. Digital twins for the actual manufacturing system. And when I say the system manufacturing, we're not talking about cell manufacturing, which I mentioned earlier, but for the system, if we have a digital twin, that we can also look at how we're designing the battery system for mobility. And digitization of battery testing. This also kind of comes into the area of reuse. We need to be able to do really good diagnostics on the batteries when they're produced initially and after a certain stage of life, and also at the end of their first life before they can be reused, for example, for second life applications. Stationary storage. That area, I have to say, there was a very long list of different things that really need to be investigated. It was quite interesting to see that area because there is a lot to be done. And currently, we do not have a lot of stationary storage really integrated into our energy system. It is sorely needed. We are introducing more and more intermittent energy into our system. And if we can really utilize energy storage in a good way, then we will have huge gains to make. And last but not least, recycling is a very important area that we have to look at. I realize my time is running quite quickly, so I think I will go to, let's say, the next slide and the slide after, please. So this, I'm just going to show you quickly on the screen. This is an example that I've extracted from our roadmap to, for example, on raw materials and recycling. And this is where we look at the different priorities. We list them out. They're all described in different chapters. And we also look at the time frame that this research work needs to be done within and what time we really need to have it delivered. So if you can go to the next slide, please. We've also looked at this in the aspects of manufacturing. And the next slide, please. Next one again. And one important thing we have really looked at and spent a lot of our time doing is looking at the key performance indicators, the KPIs. And this is for the many different areas where we can see batteries will be applied. It's not only for EVs. Batteries are currently being applied in waterborne technology, and more for stationary storage. We see they're not integrated everywhere, but we see the option and the possibility. Also off-road machinery and, for example, on building sites. Road transport, when it comes not necessarily to EVs, but it can be integrated with other solutions for heavier applications. And in some cases for off-road technology, off-road machinery. We also look at the KPIs in relation to safety and sustainability, material sourcing and tracking, recycling, and the manufacturing and the materials. So I hope this kind of has given you an overview of the different areas we have addressed. If you could go to the skills and education, please. I kind of want to round off with explaining our task force, and as Ilka has explained earlier, there's going to be a lot of jobs coming up, and our task force for skills and education have really dived in and looked at this. We see that there are many, many employment opportunities coming for Europe. And the task force has really looked and has looked at the different programs that are currently available and what is needed. There is a big lack of education programs. They've also looked at the different skills that are needed, and they have initiated good exchange between industry and academia to adapt curricula. Overall, they have established this EDU network, which really is there to bring together all those involved in skills and education development to discuss this and work in a collective way. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. And the next one, please. And I hope you can participate in Batteries Europe. The 10 minutes is too short to explain 2.5 years excellent work with the many, many brilliant people that have been involved. But thank you very much. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Edel, for this very good overview of what Batteries Europe has done. And indeed, maybe we need more time to explain everything. But I think it was a very nice overview and to show all the content that has been produced by Batteries Europe. So thanks a lot, Edel, and we will move to the next speaker with Michael Lippert from SAFT. Michael is Director of Innovation and Solutions for Energy at SAFT. He's also the chairman of BEPA, the Battery European Partnership Association. Is the Vice President of EASE, the European Association for the Storage of Energy, and is also the chairman of the governing board of the Batteries Europe ETIP. Michael has a long-standing background in batteries and is in charge of market strategy for SAFT energy storage system business unit at the company headquarters near Paris. Michael, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Simon, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Well, you heard that I have a couple of hats, so I chose not to take anyone up today. But not precisely, I'm talking to you more on behalf of BEPA today and Batteries for Europe. And if you do not know exactly or understand what these two animals how they fit together and what they have to do together, I hope in 10 minutes from now you have a little bit of better understanding of what is Battery for You and what is BEPA and how we fit into this global picture. So next slide, please. So what is Battery for You? It is a co-programmed partnership under Horizon Europe. That makes it clear. The topic we are talking about is the Horizon Europe 7-year frame program for research and innovation in the area of batteries. And the partnership means we have at least two partners. On the one hand, the European Commission, and on the other hand, well, the BEPA Association. The BEPA is therefore it's an association, and it brings together industry and academia that are active in the area of battery developments. So Battery for You is the name of the partnership, and BEPA is the name of the association. The association as such has been founded last December only, formally. We have by now 175 members. And what else the slide says, what we have on the table, what we are discussing about, as I said, battery research and innovation under Horizon Europe figures out to 925 million over the 7 years of this Horizon Europe frame program. So the work we are doing in this partnership is, first of all, to have a pretty much result-oriented and therefore also industry-focused discussion on what precisely do we need to put under the Horizon Europe programs to select priorities in the view of what will have the best impact, the highest impact, and what is most critical for the European industry to be done. But there is also a commitment of the industry because it's not just about how do we share this money. It is also to say and this is a formal and formalized commitment to say that the industry and academia, they will contribute to this global effort at least an equivalent amount of these 925 million euro. So, well, that's what the partnership is all about. It's a commitment to work together and to contribute on each side. So the next slide, please. Well, we have a global vision, which is indeed to establish by 2030 a world-class innovation ecosystem in batteries in Europe. This will boost a competitive, sustainable, and circular European battery value chain. Each word is important here because, and it's not a surprise if we say competitive, it is challenging. Europe is globally not well known of being the most cost-effective place to manufacture things in the world, neither electronics nor solar power panels. But we have this ambition for batteries to be competitive and in the same time being sustainable. So to have the lowest possible carbon footprint for manufacturing batteries, including, of course, also the life cycle impact of these batteries once they are in the use. And to make it circular. Yes, because you have seen we are constrained already on raw materials. So the more we can recover and the most efficiently we can recover raw materials, the better it will be for this ecosystem. Well, and overall, we're not just doing this for our own purpose. We are doing this, of course, because we believe it will drive the transformation towards a carbon neutral society. It will and is an important aspect of electrification of our power systems and transportation systems. The next slide, please. Very briefly, so I said 175 members as per September. You see a pretty well shared part of industry members and research members and some associate members and a pretty well distribution from a geographical point of view. Just to mention, of course, the membership is obviously open, so you can become a member. And if you want to know more, don't hesitate to contact us, or there's a website where you can learn more about what it means to be a member of BEPA. Precisely for the next slide, our members are active usually or typically if they're not sitting at the board, like me, they are involved in one of the working groups. So we do have 5 working groups. The 3 of them are pretty much in line with the value chain work stream you have seen in Edol's presentation before. So one is raw materials and recycling. The second one is on advanced materials and manufacturing. And the third one is at the edge of the value chain about battery end users and applications. And we also have 2, say more, transversal working groups, safety, reliability, and sustainability. So what is the work in these working groups? Of course, it is to work on our own internal research and innovation agenda, but mainly to identify, prioritize, and draft the R&I topics that we will propose for the Horizon Europe work programs. And these are then discussed, fine-tuned, and adopted by the European Commission and then published as such in their work programs. Next slide, please. So we are working towards general objectives, which are, as I mentioned, to contribute to the energy transition. But we also have set ourselves some more specific objectives, which are precisely to develop differentiating competitive technologies in battery materials, cell design and manufacturing, and recycling for Europe. And with this, accelerate this development of sustainable and affordable batteries in the clean mobility, on the mobility side, and on the third bullet point here, to enable the cost-effective integration of renewables to the power grid. So this is the stationary side. Behind this, and I don't show you the slide here, there are, of course, a couple of technical objectives, and they are talking about energy density, they are talking about cost, they are talking about manufacturing efficiency and things like this. The next slide, please. I mentioned that we are having pretty much an industry focus view, and also a very much battery, central battery focus. If you see on this slide, the entire value chain, so from raw materials, advanced materials, cells, packs, to the integration and to end of life, BEPA is focusing on the areas that are directly linked to, say, more the battery, the electrochemical part of the battery cell, which means in particular on advanced materials and cell technology and manufacturing. The next slide, please. Yeah, we can skip the comments. And and therefore, very much, I think, coherent with what with the workflow that is coming from the ETIP and with the working groups we have established, we are thinking in terms of areas, the area of raw materials, advanced materials, and battery end users, and the cross-cutting issues that are described in the strategic roadmap, which we call the SPHERE, which is a public document and you can download. But most importantly, for the next slide, the Horizon Europe work program represent, well, the calls that are then published in the Horizon Europe work program, they fit very much and very well to these different areas. And I will certainly not read out all the calls, but what you can see here is a summary of the Horizon Europe Battery Work Program 2021 and 2022. So in black, it's the call from this year, which has closed this very week on the 19th of October. In red, you see those calls that will come up next year and that will close by the 6th of September next year. And you can see they are pretty much spread over the 3 areas, plus what we call coordination actions, which is to globally coordinate the different activities in the research and innovation community. And I need to put some figures on this if you click once. Well, for the first 2 years, the entire amount represents about 300 million euro. And again, they are spread over these areas and over the 2 years. And without a surprise, you can see that half of it goes into what I just mentioned as being really the central part of what we are looking at, advanced materials and manufacturing, and in particular, the development of the next generation of lithium-ion batteries, those we call in particular the solid-state technologies. I will finish with this slide. Simon mentioned initially that, yes, Battery4You is not the only partnership, and luckily there are a couple of other partnerships that coexist and that under Horizon Europe, and we are working very closely with them because there are areas we work together, or where simply it is the other partnership that is leading the effort. And you see here 2 examples. For example, in the electric vehicle side, the EV industry has broad resources for research. They consider that the battery is an integral and physically, mechanically integrated part of the vehicle, including by now the structure of the vehicle. So they are interested mainly in the cells, whereas the modules, the packs, and the integration are really vehicle specific, and therefore they are dealt with in or under the 2.0 partnership. So yellow here is what the battery partnership is doing. Green is what the area of the 2.0 partnership. This is different in the waterborne because the community, of course, has certainly not the same reach than the EV, but very specifically waterborne, they would expect a functional battery unit to be delivered. Therefore, for what concerns waterborne, we will also look into the modules and the storage units, whereas the waterborne partnership will be, the activities will narrow down to more the integration and use. But in any case, and you please click, there is a close cooperation in both ways, because we expect these different areas to express their needs, to look forward what will be the needs in batteries from 5 years or 10 years from now. We will feed back to them what is our long-term roadmap, because if you conceive a car, a train, you should, and on a 10 years horizon, you should have an idea of how batteries will look like in 10 years from now. We cooperate on the interfaces, but we also have a feedback on the progress we do on each side. So this is this cooperation framework, which is very important in order, and I come back to what I said earlier, in order to bring forward our ecosystem towards a competitive, sustainable, and mainly, hopefully, successful industry in the coming years. With this, thank you very much for listening. This is my contribution for today, and give it back to Simon.
Thanks a lot, Michael, for this very nice presentation of the battery partnership. Indeed, it's a very important tool to support research and innovation in Europe in the coming years. So we will move to the last speaker, not the least, with Christina Edström, professor at Uppsala University. Christina is also the leader of the Battery 2030 Plus initiative. She is a director of the Angström Advanced Battery Center in Uppsala. She has more than 300 scientific papers with an H-index of 69. She's an elected member of the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences, also an elected member of the Royal Academy of Sciences, and honorary doctor at NTNU. She received the KTH Grand Prize, the gold medal from IVA, and she's a Wallenberg Scholar. And finally, Christina is also the scientific coordinator of Battery Sweden, and she is involved in the board of the Faraday initiative in the UK. Christina, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this very nice introduction. The last program to hear about, the DOER program, the program that actually tries to take a roadmap and take it into action. And of course, the other initiatives you heard about, the partnership Batteries Europe, are extremely important for this. And we started 2018 as a reaction, I think, to the formation of European Battery Alliance, that we also wanted in parallel a long-term research initiative. And by then and that's the reason for the name, why we call it 2030 plus. I guess we soon have to rename to 2040 plus to show that we are supposed to be really long-term, a little bit lower tier levels, and really generate sort of golden nudges, hopefully, for the European industry. And our part of this value circle that Michael showed you is rather the same as what the partnership is covering. So we are very, very well aligned with this. And when we started to form a roadmap, we looked at all the roadmaps we have the European set plan, etc. And we realized that we really need to do is to reinvent the way we invent the ultra-high batteries of the future. Find ideas how we can accelerate the finding of new materials and new battery concepts. And also add smart functionalities to battery cells. If you go for some of the more, I would say, demanding chemistry, if you want to increase the energy content per volume in something, it also comes with the risk of being more unstable. And then you have to work on lifetime issues and controlling aging processes, etc. And that's the idea here. And also perhaps support that we need recycling of materials. So therefore, we are supposed to be disruptive and long-term, but we always need to have manufacturability and recyclability in mind to actually be also realistic, not just blue sky. So we are important in that respect. Next slide, please. So Battery 2030 Plus is this pan-European large-scale research environment. And we work together then to implement these goals we set out in this roadmap. And we're doing that through a number of projects. And I'm coordinating the coordination and support action. So I'm in that respect sort of forming this Battery 2030 Plus together with the coordinators of the different projects. And if you click on the next slide, you see our biggest project is BigMap. Then we have 3 little smaller sensing projects, and we have 2 what we call self-healing projects. The sensoring and the self-healing, they are together then the smart functionalities, while the whole materials acceleration platform and battery interface genome is in this BigMap project, which takes about half our budget. And if you see what Batteries Europe are doing with protocols and standards, it's very aligned to what also BigMap is trying to do in practice. So we can sometimes say that we're almost like a test bed for some of the things that come up in Batteries Europe. Next slide, please. This looks perhaps a bit boring with these boxes, but it's just to show that in the Commission, by building this large-scale initiative, they have the idea that we have the mission to put the green battery, not on the moon, but here on the globe, and particularly in Europe. So they have actually said that we have to collaborate, we have to progress in relation to our roadmap, but also to the set plan. We should identify and contribute to guidelines and best practice for data sharing and fair data, very much the BigMap project. Contribute to standardization of protocols for experimental data and for modeling methods tools. So of course it's very important that Batteries Europe and Battery 2030 Plus are working in harmony together, and I think we are doing that. And of course we also identify current needs and gaps. So what we do is that we suggest new R&I actions, and then we try to align that with the R&I actions suggested from Batteries Europe, and then we hand this over like a big matrix to Batteries, the BEPA, to really select the best combination of these suggestions for something that is really important and good for Europe, according to the Battery Partnership Strategic Action Plan. And I just want to show that also for us, we have to contribute to European curricula. And the idea is when you have new sort of ideas and new research coming out, you should quickly transform it to some educational curricula as well. So I'm very happy for the EDU network that is organized by Batteries Europe, but where Batteries 2030 Plus has the chairmanship with the Professor Silvia Bodoardo from Polito. And of course, we have to think about exploitation and IPR. Even if you are doing long-term and low TRL research, you can come up with things very quickly in this field. Next slide, please. So this is who we are currently with the new projects launched now for 2022, which is the progression of the Battery 2030 Plus roadmap. It might look differently, but we are 24 countries, including also some of the associated countries like Norway and UK and Turkey, etc. And it's 102 organizations and it's distributed like that. And also the coordination sort of following a diagonal along then Europe. Next slide, please. So our aims are invent ultra high performance batteries that are safe, affordable and sustainable. And sustainability will just be even more important for the future. and provide new tools and breakthrough technologies to the European battery industry through the value chain. And of course, leadership. When it comes to the bibliometric studies that we soon will report, we can see that China is shooting up, and that there are few institutions in Europe that even can come on the top 10 list in the world. So for the research output in Europe is actually a little bit declining, what we can see on the global scale. So we hope that these initiatives now put in place can actually take back a lot of also the scientific leadership in this area. And I think it's important because industries want to be where the best brains are and pick the best brains. And I think this is important. Next slide, please. So this ambitious roadmap there, we have these, the big map, as I said, the integration of smart functionalities and cross-cutting areas. And I bring this up because the coordination support action has to show they're really working together. So they're actually sharing now ways of handling data and storing data so that you can make them available for different things. Where they are also sharing ideas on modeling tools that you can use, developing one project and using another, etc. I see that's coming up, and that's very, very exciting. So next slide, please. One important thing for us, I said that we have to move along the set plan. This is really the set plan with the different generations and what we see coming up. But we are chemistry agnostic. So we really, the tools we are developed, we test on maybe today on a little bit more well-known chemistries. We will move it to more and more difficult new systems to see and test along these more than 10-year roadmap. Next slide, please. And so this roadmap is sort of cut into 3 pieces. Short term, which is we are sort of 1/3 into this short term one now. Develop theoretical and experimental platforms and tools. Just to summarize it, we have a long list in our roadmap that you can download and read. And then we move it in 2023 into a medium-term phase where we integrate the different parts. And then in long term, we should have a sort of a toolbox which we can test on different chemistries, because the different chemistries will not be the same, and there will be other kinds of problems, but the methods should hopefully support that. Next slide. Yeah, I just want to give you some highlights on where we have come after 1 year of this really being the doers, and that the big map have actually been able to publish the largest dynamic data management plan ever scientifically, and to describe how you can share data infrastructure for fair data with different tools. And we have a repository in the Big Map project and an app store where you can find this. You can also find it if you just Google on it. And we transition from sequential to Edisonian battery development, which is sort of a more cycle loop to get some kind of autonomous discovery of materials and interfaces. And when it comes to the sensors, the different projects have very different approaches, so they're very complementary. So while Instabat works on multi-sensor platform with different physical and virtual sensors, the Spartacus project, they do some acoustic sensoring. Sensibat, they develop different sensors to really be able to show pressure, temperature, impedance, and more details than you can do with current sensors that are put into cells. It's very important they are put into cells. When it comes to the self-healing, but forever go for silicon electrodes that have very volume expansion contraction problem, and they are really difficult to stabilize in a battery. And they do polymers that can sort of break and find itself to keep sort of the whole integrity of the electrode in place. While Hidden go for the even more ambitious to have handle the dendrite formation of lithium metals with either a liquid crystal electrolyte or a piezoelectric separator that also should break this while sort of it's pressing on it. And they have all these projects start to show results now, and it will be very exciting to follow what's happening the nearest year on these examples. And we have also a great interest from some of these large European infrastructures like the synchrotrons, the neutron facilities, the big European computing centers, etc. So we have also been sort of singled out as sort of a test bed for the kind of roadmaps also for the synchrotrons and neutron organizations. And that's very also exciting that we can play this role of being a test bed for other organizations that also want to develop and be useful for industry and for research. Next slide. Thank you for listening, and I hope it made some sense. If it didn't give you any sense, we have you find the roadmap on our webpage. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Christina, for explaining to us what is Battery 2030 Plus about, and also what are the different projects within the Battery 2030 Plus portfolio. With that, I think we have finished all the presentations, so I hope it gave you a good overview of what's going on in Europe today in the field of batteries and more particularly on research and innovation. So we will move to the panel discussion. As I said at the beginning, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask them on the chat, and we'll try to answer them. So let's start with some questions to our speakers now. Maybe we could go through the different impacts that we have listened about. So we talked about environmental impact, social impacts, economic impact. So if we start with the economic impact, I have a question for Christina. So in Battery 2030 Plus, but also in other more, let's say, short-term projects or initiatives, researchers and industry are developing new technologies for batteries. According to you, what are the key technologies that will come on the market on the medium term or in the long term? And what will be the impact of these technologies on the competitiveness of the European industry?
Well, if you look a little bit short term, I think what we see now in the sodium battery field is very exciting. That is actually by going into a phase where we see that industry is sort of looking at it more seriously, and that we also have spin-off companies in Europe that can play a role in this if we play it well in Europe. And of course, we have also really a strong, I would say, sodium battery research cuddling this, and some of these spin-off companies actually come from research efforts. So I think here we have an interesting really development. I see, of course, solid state coming soon. According to the Faraday Institution, we'll see by 2030 around 7% of the market will be solid state. And there is a question if it will be what kind of solid state batteries it will be. We see already polymer based, but there are also the ceramic and glassy type of electrolytes that are coming up and being interesting. When it comes to the ones that were really sort of hyped 10 years ago, the lithium air and so on, it still will keep the scientists busy for a long time more because it's such a complex and reactive system. But I think we see very interesting things going on also in the redox flow battery field. There we can see things coming quite soon. And I see also that research is starting to boost up also in that field. It has not been so strong in Europe, but it's coming really more. And there we see some new ideas based on the sustainability ideas. And of course, I also think that we will see some differentiation. If we think that we really want the the batteries with really high volumetric capacity, it will be tough for a long time to compete with the lithium-ion batteries. There we can hope that the new generations can move in. But we might need for other sectors to really think about maybe cheaper material, maybe not as energy dense, but that can be really long-term stable and be used for what we think we need for stabilizing the grid and grid quality, etc. So I see it's a very dynamic and open palette of different chemistries we see in the future, and I think that's very exciting also as a scientist, that you will see this kind of interaction between the industry and research, and it will influence each other in this respect.
Thank you, Christina, for this answer. And you talked about batteries without or with less critical raw materials, which is indeed a challenge. And maybe it brings me to my next question. My next question to Ilkka about the supply of raw materials and the ethical sourcing, which is a challenge for the battery value chain in terms of environmental impact, but also social impact. So my question for Ilkka is how this can be managed by the battery industry or by the European Union, and how we can improve the European independence towards battery raw materials.
Thank you. Yes, I think that are indeed a pressing issue for the battery industry. And coming back to the title, I think we have all different aspects to consider. We have the environmental impacts, we have the social impacts, but also governance coming all back together. And one of the most pressing issues is, of course, verification that the material is sustainably produced, taking in consideration not only the environmental impact. I think there's a lot of things we can improve when it comes to water management, but also greenhouse gas emissions, the management of the tailings, but also biodiversity and health and safety aspects. So it's not only the environment, but also the people who work there. And to do this in a transparent manner, we have to increase the traceability of the raw materials and be able actually to trace it back to the source, to the mines. And that is regardless whether they come from Europe or from other parts of the world. I think in Europe we already have quite good standards. I think once we start to introduce them in Europe, it will also have effects on mines or projects in other parts of the world, which overall will increase the ESG profiles of raw materials extraction. But I think, especially when it comes to Europe, we have one of the great barriers is public acceptance. And I think here we have really a lot of work to do to increase the awareness that if we want to switch from fossil fuels to not only batteries, but a lot of the green technologies, we will increase the demand for metals and minerals quite tremendously. And this will require new mines for the foreseeable future, but also increased efforts in recycling to actually get back valuable metals and materials in a circular economy. And I think there the research community especially can help and increase the amounts of metals and minerals that we actually can bring back to the industry through recycling. So yes, there are challenges, but I think I saw also a question in the chat, the ongoing initiatives of the Global Battery Alliance on establishing a battery passport. I think that is a very, very good initiative that is actually targeting a lot of the questions that I addressed on environmental impacts, on child labor, so the entire ethical aspects as well, and to make this sector more transparent and trustworthy. We at the EBA, we are started to work together on the GBA. Together with that, if you want to have more information on that, you can reach out to me. But I think it is really good if there is a good cooperation from this initiative together with Europe, so that we have one common set of standards, that it's really not only about us, but on a global picture to get this material in a sustainable manner.
Thank you, Ilka. And indeed, this critical raw material or the raw material issue is not only a challenge for batteries, but for all the technologies for the energy transition, so photovoltaics, magnets, and so on. So, yeah, there is something to do here in Europe. Michael, I don't know if, yes? Michael, I don't know if you want to complement quickly what Ilka said.
Yeah, maybe to give an additional viewpoint on this. Indeed, Ilka, you showed that we will progress in terms of our autonomy for raw materials, but nevertheless, we will not be 100% self-sufficient on this. I mean, there are if we won't have all the nickel we need, but that's not a drama either. But we do need and we do cooperate with outside European borders, with mining companies and with suppliers of these raw materials. The positive thing now is that, on the one hand, also pushed through European regulation, but also through the importance the European battery industry will have in the future, that if we as an industry in Europe push these standards, the ethical standards, we get more credibility and they are also accepted. Whereas maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was really difficult to explain this to suppliers and to impose it. I think I saw last week one of our members for advanced materials signing an agreement with a Chinese raw material supplier, and of course they were validated and accepted these standards that exist as per today. And there are still some technical things to be done, like the traceability. But globally speaking, I think the credibility of the European industry pushing these sustainable and ethical raw material supplies will really, be accepted and implemented worldwide, and we can work together with suppliers outside Europe. We do need to do this, but I think we're starting to show that this can work also outside European borders.
Yeah. Just as a remark on that very valid point, Michael, I think we are not talking to any raw material supplier, and we get contacted by a lot of them also on a global basis that are not aware of the proposed battery regulation. And it's only at this stage, it's only a proposal, but everyone is really preparing for it who wants to make business with Europe. So it already had an enormous effect, a positive effect, I would say, on the industry on a global scale. So that's
yes, and you agree that this is totally different from the situation 2 or 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, and talking about the battery regulation, maybe it brings me to another question to Edel. This new battery regulation that is being prepared, according to you, what will be the impact of this regulation, in particular to push research and innovation to create new solutions that can reduce the environmental impacts of or the environmental footprint of batteries?
Well, with the battery regulation, we see really they're putting in place the expected CO2 footprint of the batteries. Ideally, in an ideal world, let's all produce batteries with renewable energy. That's the ideal situation. But unfortunately, it's not the situation we stand with our energy mix in Europe at the moment. I'm happy to be from Norway, where we have this kind of energy mix, but the realism is that it's not across Europe in every country. So we have to also really look at other ways we can reduce the CO2 footprint. And today we've kind of gone through the entire battery value chain. And there are so many different areas, as I said, where there's opportunities for gains. And those opportunities for gains can be from when you're refining the materials. Can we do that in a more energetically efficient way? Can we reduce the energy input there? Because that requires a lot of energy, the refining processes. Or can we refine them in a location that has the possibility to lower the CO2 footprint? Then we also talk about the advanced materials. When you upscale the advanced materials, when we are doing research, we are now taking in the element of thinking about what is the energy requirement in this process. It's not just all about producing a fantastic end product that has the characteristics you want. It's also how you produce it. If you need a carbonization process, for example, when we look at many of the different carbon and graphite materials, how energetic are the requirements in that process? Does it make sense to do it on the balance when you really have this push to reduce the CO2 footprint? And all across the value chain, there are different points where we can really look into this, where we can reduce the energy usage. And also from another point of view of our value chain and our reverse logistics, our logistics within our value chain. Can we reduce the footprint there? And research can do a lot to look and address these, both the hard research in the lab, and I would say the soft research where you look at modeling and look at the better ways of doing things. So there is a lot of ground to be gained, and because the battery regulation is just coming now, we see that these are starting to be tackled and they are being addressed. Some of them are lower hanging fruit. They're being addressed quicker than others. So that's, I hope that gives a little bit of an answer without diving into the specifics of each and every part of the value chain.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you very much. Christina, I don't know, as a coordinator of Battery 2030 Plus and as a researcher and professor, do you want to complement a little bit what Adele has said about this? The impact of the new battery regulation on battery research?
I think Edel paints a very important picture, and I think research will definitely inspire for it. And I think there are a lot of green chemistry approaches also in the synthesis of materials. It's just that the lab scale has to think large scale and upscaling, and that sort of transition is really important for us to do. And I think maybe we have a little bit too little of fundamental research in the upscaling phase and in the production phase. And that's something we should perhaps bring in more in Battery 2030 Plus, because I think that can be long-term also. Thinking up substitution is of course also important by really trying to find every component you can which can give you better sustainability. But that's tricky because you have to think not only carbon dioxide, you have to think energy and also toxicity and solvents, etc. So it's rather complex. But I hope the modeling is coming to a point where it actually can predict things. It has not been there yet, but I hope it can come there.
Thank you, Christina. I see that time is running, so maybe we will have a last question about the environmental impact. So it's a question for Michael. We have learned today that batteries will have a great impact on the environment, especially by decarbonizing road transport. How do you see the role of batteries versus the role of other technologies that can also contribute to the decarbonization of our society? Because batteries is not the only technology that will come into play.
I wonder which technologies you refer to.
For example, hydrogen or biofuels or e-fuels, or if we stay, for example, in the transport sector.
Yeah. Well, there's maybe just a little bit back to fundamentals. We are talking about, on the one hand, electrification of transportation, and not only road transportation, but transportation in its whole, and globally electrification of many things that are not necessarily electrified, including, for example, heat, but also including things like, to take an example from our EASE conference this week, backup for data centers. I mean, you know, data centers, they are huge energy consumers. They still rely on diesel backup. And this could be electrified with batteries. And on the other hand, we need to integrate the renewables into our grids. So that's a huge challenge. We have about, say, 20% of renewables on our grid, and already we see to start the technical challenges and the market challenges right now. We want to come to 55 and 80%, which is a huge challenge. So we do need a lot of more flexibilities, and batteries contribute to this. Batteries either installed as a standalone or in association with renewables, but also all the batteries we will see in the vehicle fleet. I'm saying this because it answers to the fact that these different systems, transportation systems, electrical systems and grids, they are interconnected, they need to work together, and there are, of course, the areas of complementarity we need to work on. Now, you are right, batteries, there is not a silver bullet, and batteries cannot solve it all. Batteries, for what concerns the transportation, of course, they are reservoirs with limited energy content, and they are suitable for certain distances. We see hydrogen as a complementary for very huge energy reservoirs for very long distances. And to give you the example on the rail transportation, there will be a transition from diesel-driven, diesel-electric locomotives for certain distances with batteries, and beyond this, it may be hydrogen, knowing that each of the technologies have their advantages and their disadvantages, and one is more suited for certain types of use and others for other types of use. Quickly, on the stationary side as well, we clearly identify batteries as a very suitable storage means for short-term use. They can be used very immediately. They are suitable for several hours or daily storage, and this is what we are mainly addressing today, because we only have 20% of renewables on the grid. But as these renewables will grow, we will need longer-term storage, and hydrogen has certainly a role to play here, not necessarily to store hydrogen and to unstore it back, transform it into electricity, because we all know that this is not very efficient. But we can we can transform abundant electricity from wind farms into hydrogen, and then inject hydrogen into the industry or for other purposes, or also, of course, store the electricity over very long periods to have weekly, monthly, or seasonal storage. So yes, they are absolutely complementary, not to talk about systems where directly we would embark both hydrogen and the battery, coming back to my example of a train, simply because batteries are very suitable for very fast reaction, high power and cycling, whereas typically hydrogen-based energy systems are more for longer term usages, and both together in a hybrid system, of course, can in certain applications give a very perfect and suitable solution.
Thank you, Michael, for this very comprehensive answer to a quite difficult question. So I think we come to the end of this webinar. It's 3 p.m. now. So I would like to first thank all the speakers, Michael, Ilka, Eder, and Christina, for the very interesting and presentations about the battery landscape in Europe, and also about the impacts of batteries in terms of economic, social, and environmental impacts. I would like also to thank the European Commission for giving us this opportunity to talk about batteries during the European Sustainable Energy Week. Last but not least, I would like to thank the organizers of this webinar, so Batteries Europe, BEPA, and Battery 2030 Plus, and especially Sabrina Hastings-Mela and Capucine Van Orenberg, who has worked quite hard to prepare everything. So, having said that, thanks a lot for this webinar, and goodbye.
Thank you for listening, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.